So there's this comedy skit that has just absolutely blowed up online. And it's not just because it's funny, right? It's because it takes aim directly at the modern church. And man, has it sparked a massive and kind of complicated conversation. So yeah, let's dive into it.
All right, so the guy at the center of this whole firestorm, the comedian Druski, he dropped this parody of a charismatic church service, and it just went instantly viral. We're talking millions of views and just a tidal wave of reactions.
And of course, that's the big question everyone started asking, right? Did this comedian go too far? I mean, did the skit cross that line from just being comedy into straight-up mockery? Was it, a disrespectful attack on faith? Well, the source material we're digging into today says the answer's not quite that simple.
So check this out. The immediate reaction from our source is really interesting. It says 2 things should happen when you see the skit. First, you should laugh, because, let's be honest, it's pretty funny. But it also says you should be angry. And here's the twist. Not angry at the comedian. Nope. Angry for a much, much deeper and way more uncomfortable reason.
And that right there, that brings us to the real heart of the argument from the source. The reason the parody hit so hard, the reason it's so funny, is because it's frighteningly accurate. It's basically holding up a mirror to certain parts of the church today. So let's break this down, because this is the crucial distinction the source makes. You've got the obvious anger, right? The one on the surface. That's the anger at Druski for mocking the church. Easy to understand. But then there's the real anger, the one the source says we should feel, and that's the outrage that the parody is so true. In this quote, this really gets to the heart of it. The source is basically asking, am I your enemy because I tell you the truth? The point is, Druski isn't the bad guy here. He's just the messenger, He's just reflecting a reality that was already out there. He didn't invent any of this. He just turned a camera on it. So in this case, it's really just art imitating life. The source argues that pretty much everything Druski makes fun of has a real-life counterpart. So for the next part of this breakdown, we're going to look at the actual examples the source gives to prove this point. All right, let's get into the specifics. We're going to break down 3 key things from the parody and see how they stack up against the real-world examples that the source points to. Okay, first up, the fundraising. Druski's skit absolutely skewers those super theatrical, high-pressure tactics. You know what I'm talking about. The dramatic pleas, the guilt trips, that whole we need it now sense of urgency to get people to open their wallets. You think that's an exaggeration? Well, get this. The source points to actual services where pastors have said things exactly like this. Like literally telling the ushers to lock the doors until the fundraising goal is met. All of a sudden, the parody doesn't seem so much like a parody anymore, does it? All right, next element, the praise break. In this skit, it honestly looks more like a scene from a nightclub than a moment of worship, right? It's all about this secular, worldly kind of dancing. And here's the source's take on it. These praise breaks, they often just feel like filler, like a substitute for actual, deep biblical teaching. The idea is that it becomes a performance to keep the crowd entertained when maybe there's not much of a real message to give. And the third one, designer pastors. Yep. The parody goes after pastors who are all about luxury brands, showing off super expensive designer clothes. We're talking Christian Dior, right from the pulpit. And again, you think this is made up? This quote is from a real pastor. When someone asked why he was wearing Christian Dior, his response was, "'Cause I'm a Christian and I walk in the blood of Jesus." I mean, it's a perfect example of what the source is saying. Druski didn't have to invent this stuff. He just had to pay attention. Okay, so if these things are actually happening, that leads to a really big question, right? Who's to blame? I mean, who is responsible for letting this kind of stuff happen and even thrive in the church? Now, the source uses a pretty strong word here, a provocative metaphor. It calls these kinds of pastors clowns. But it also argues they aren't the real root of the problem. So who enables them? What allows them to do this? To get the source's answer, you have to think about it like this. What does any performer, any clown, need to exist? What is the one essential thing they absolutely cannot function without? An audience. That's the punchline. According to the source, a clown has no power without an audience. A performer needs a stage, and more importantly, they need people in the seats watching and clapping. So let's connect the dots here. The source's argument is that these pastors are kind of like a class clown. They're fueled by attention. They couldn't get away with what they do if thousands of people didn't show up every week, cheer them on, and put money in the offering plate. So in this view, the congregation isn't some innocent victim. They're the audience. They're the ones giving these performers a stage.
Okay, so if the audience is part of the problem, then it stands to reason that the solution has to come from within too. And that's where this all leads, to a really powerful call to action for the church itself.
And the source puts it right out there with this question. It basically asks, shouldn't it be us who's responsible for cleaning the church out? Them or us? It's a direct challenge. Instead of getting mad at a comedian on the outside for pointing out the problems, the focus flips to taking responsibility on the inside. So what's the path forward here? According to the source, it's not about winning arguments online. It's about living in such a way that the parody starts to look ridiculous and totally untrue. It's about letting people see your good deeds, living excellent lives, basically refuting the stereotype with your actions, not just your words. And that brings us to this final, really powerful thought from the source. The reason the church lacks respect is because the church doesn't command respect. The idea is that respect isn't something you can just demand from people. It's something you have to earn. You have to command through your actions and integrity. So the question it leaves us all with is, what does it actually take to command that respect back?